welcome to Garden Angels. Now this week is so jam-packed with ideas and inspiration that it's guaranteed to get you out of the house and into the garden.
What are you swatting me with?
Sorry, hon. We are creating a veggie snack track for kids, so everything that you can pick and eat straight from the garden.
Talking about food, I'm showing you how to grow mushrooms at your own place, so stick around.
And what about that dark, dingy, ugly area of the house called the side passage?
I've got one.
Well, I'll show you what you can do with one. You're watching Garden Angels.
Mushrooms, they're one of those superfoods full of B vitamins and minerals. Great for your family's health. They're really tasty, especially on the barbecue, but did you know they're really easy to grow? There's a whole range of kits available on the market for all sorts of mushrooms. Well, I've got all the goodies for growing mushrooms in here, and I've used my mate's stables, but you don't need stables. You know, you could use your cellar or an old cupboard in the house. It just needs to be cool and moist. This is the perfect environment for growing mushrooms. We've got the shiitakes over there and the lovely oyster mushrooms, but back to them later. Here are the buttons, and I have to say the button mushrooms or the champignons, they're the easiest ones to grow. Great for the kids because they come in a box, about $20 at the hardware store. This is really going to amaze you. It's the most fascinating way of growing mushrooms I've ever seen. Growing shiitakes is quite a process, really, and you've really got to be a bit of an expert. So let me show you how to do it. This is what you get in the end, these wonderful shiitake mushrooms bursting out of the oak logs. But I've sent away for a mushroom growing kit, and this is what I've got in the mail. These little bits of wooden dowel with the mushroom spores actually impregnated into it. So all I've got to do now is actually insert it into the bits of log. You can use willow, birch, but really oak is best. I cut this about 4 weeks ago and it's just been drying, and then I whacked it into the kids' pool, and that really just helps accelerate the process. Now I've got to get the drill. The right size drill bit comes with the kit, so all I need to do is drill 40 to 50 holes in this one bit of log. Next step is to insert the dowel into those holes. Heat some beeswax that came in the kit and just seal each hole. Just hang your logs up on a bit of string away from the rats that'll eat your first harvest, and every 2 weeks bring them down, soak them in some water for 24 hours, and you should get your harvest in about 6 months' time. My favourite mushroom has to be the oyster mushroom. I love these just pan-fried with a little bit of kaffir lime, some fish sauce and a bit of chilli. They're really easy to grow. They actually are growing in coffee grounds. I've gone to my local cafe and I've got some extras, so all you need is some old oysters, a nice hessian sack and a bucket of coffee. Get some oyster mushrooms from your local greengrocer. The older, the better, so you might get someone special. Just break them up into 1 or 2 pieces, and then just insert them about 5 centimetres deep into the coffee. Now these mushrooms need constant moisture and a constant temperature, and if you can keep the temperature at about 21 degrees, you'll see these strands of mycelium popping up in about 7 days' time. Just keep it nice and moist and close that lid because of course they really need the darkness to grow. Your first crop should be ready in about 3 to 5 weeks, ready to harvest.
Now, most people have one. It's that boring, pokey, tired little space around the side of the house. Yes, that's right, the side passage. No one wants to go around there. But don't fear, I've got some great ideas for sprucing up a somewhat unusable area and make it a lot easier to look at. Okay, so for our side passage spruce up, we've got 4 basic components. We've got pavers, pebbles, pots and plants. It couldn't get any easier, the 4 Ps, just remember that. First things first, when selecting your pavers, you don't don't really want a small format like the old clay paver unless you've got really small feet. You could perhaps choose 2 different sizes, but that's only if you've got a larger area. So, more sensibly, you would choose the same size paver, maybe a 400 by 400 or even 500 by 500. Now, I'm going to choose these ones. I like the colour, it's very contemporary, and it's got a wonderful textured finish, which will be sure to keep you steady on your feet. I've got my pavers ready to go, but the first thing I'm going to do is spray the fences. A great splash of colour will really bring out the foliage plants that I'm putting in front of it. And of course, it is much easier to be spraying fences before you put the pots and the plants into position. Well, jobs like this are always made easier if you've got a friend involved, and that's where Paddy comes in. First jobs first, we're going to spray the fence, and he's protecting the neighbours from any overspray from this airless spray gun, but it does make the job go a lot quicker when you're using one of these. Now, I've got a highly technical piece of advice for how to work out how far apart to put your pavers, and that's the pacing out technique, which is really quite simple. I'm going to walk at a comfortable pace to see how far apart I should put my pavers. And in this instance, a comfortable tread or pace for me is 700 mil. I'm putting the pavers down on a sand cement mix, and some people might know this mix as mud, and it's a very simple concoction. It consists of sand, water and cement, and it's usually in a ratio of 4 to 1. So 4 parts sand, 1 part cement. And in this case, we're using about 4 shovel loads to 1 shovel load of the cement. So what I'd do then is mix these ingredients up dry with a lurry hoe, that's this little device here, and then gradually start adding the water until the mixture is nice and buttering, sort of like the icing on a cake. Now, I've determined halfway along the path will be 450 from the house. So to keep our pavers nice and even, and of course very square and straight to the building, I'm setting up a string line. So I've just measured 200 mil, which is half the width of the paver, off that middle section, and I'll do the same at this end. Then run the string line, put a brick around it so it stays in place, and we'll just butt the pavers up to that nice straight line. To set your steppers in place, you will need a few basic tools. That is a level, a bricky's trowel so you can load all your cement down, and a rubber mallet. Now, don't even think about using a hammer or a lumpy for that matter, because you're liable to crack your pavers in half. First things first, we're going to wet down this existing concrete and also the back of our paver so that we've got good adhesion when we put our mix down. Stick around because later on I'm putting in the pebbles and the plants.
When I was a kid, I used to sneak out into the veggie patch and eat the little mini tomatoes and strawberries straight from the bush. And I remember I used to think I was being really naughty, but I'm sure that Mum and Dad just thought, oh, thank God she's eating her vegetables. Now, I do think that getting kids off the couch and out into the garden is a great way to get them excited about the food they're eating. Now, of course, we've got tomatoes and strawberries in the Angel's patch and they're doing really nicely, but there are lots of other tempting varieties for kids. There's one fruit that kids just love to eat, it's the mulberry. And of course, mulberries are really difficult to get in the shops, which is all the more reason to grow them at home. Now, I think most of us have probably got memories of feasting on fresh mulberries straight from the garden and then coming in and showing Mum all the stains on our mouths and on our clothes. Now, if you want all the sweetness without the stains, then check out this variety. This is a white mulberry. It's a deciduous tree, so it lets in the winter light. It's got great big leaves, and of course you get this wonderful honey sweet crop all through the summer. Great backyard tree and guaranteed to be a favourite with the kids. You know, I always find that kids absolutely love extremes. So they love giant pumpkins and tiny little vegetables. So baby carrots are always an absolute favourite. I'm just digging some little furrows here to plant my seed. Now the key with carrots is they need a light, well-drained soil. And the seed can be really tiny, so it can be quite difficult to sow. So how cool is this? This is actually what's called seed tape. And the tiny little seeds have been embedded into this tape. So you can simply lay them out at whatever length you want into your little groove and then simply cover them up with soil. And in about 10 to 12 weeks, these little carrots will be ready to harvest and so tasty the kids will eat them straight from the ground. They'll never make it to the salad bowl. Now, passion fruit has that wonderful, sweet, tangy combination that kids just love. Now, this one doesn't look like an ordinary passion fruit. That's because it's a variety called Panama Red, which has this wonderful maroon-coloured skin and really big fruit. It's exactly what I'm going to get in the garden today. Now, it's a grafted variety. There's also a golden form called Panama Gold, which, of course, as the name suggests, has golden skin and the same big fruit. But the value of a grafted plant is that it's more resistant to pest and disease, and it will fruit for up to 8 to 10 years. Now they're quite a vigorous vine, so they'll really quickly fill this fence area. And I tell you what, passion fruit are a really great thing to have in the garden because you get these beautiful, pretty spring flowers, and then come summer, sorry I forgot my trowel, and then come summer, you get wonderful fruit all through the warmer months. Now this is a perfect spot for a passion fruit because it's sunny, open, and it's got a great little structure for them to climb up onto. So there you go, mulberries, passion fruit, baby tomatoes, baby carrots, and of course strawberries. Get some of those varieties into the garden, and next time your kids reach for the sweets jar, send them out into the garden for the sweetest, tastiest snacks of all.
Propagation is one of the easiest ways of getting new plants, and it's super cheap. There's a couple of different techniques though. I want to show you some of them, so come into the angel shed. The trick with growing frangipanis from cutting is to take a nice small cutting and allow it to sit out in the sun for about 6 weeks. I've actually left them out for much longer and they're perfect. If you plant them straight away, you're at risk of them rotting. Have a look at this one. This one's rotted right through to the core and it definitely won't make it. Look, no root system at all. This one, however, is a perfect cutting. I took it last year, so it's been growing for 12 months. Let's see how the root system's going. Perfect root system, right around, and this one's ready for the garden, so this is exactly what we want to make. So all you need is your cutting and some propagation mix. A nice propagation mix has a lot of sand in it, which keeps the pot well drained. And the problem with frangipanis is they hate wet soil, so you've got to keep them nice and dry. So good propagation mix in there, and you just press the cutting in, and you want it to really nearly touch the bottom of the pot. Now, to get the best results from this cutting, no water, and actually put it under the eave of the house so it doesn't even get the rainfall. That means it won't get wet and it won't rot. The next technique I want to show you is called semi-hardwood cutting, and you do this for something like your grandma's camellia that you can't find at the nursery. Don't choose the new growth that's floppy, but choose old growth that when you bend it, it kind of snaps. Surprisingly, summer is the best time to take cuttings of camellia, but you could also take cuttings of box hedging, azaleas and rhododendrons. All you need is your little cutting. Remove the lower leaves because you really only want the 2 top ones. Recut it so it's nice and fresh on a 45-degree angle because it increases the surface area. And then dip it into some root hormone gel and just gently press it into your potting mix. Now, 6 months later, if you keep it moist and out of the sun, you'll get a little new plant like this. Let's take it out and see how the roots have gone. Look at these roots. Isn't that amazing? Pop it back into its pot. And then 12 months later, you've got a brand new plant that's ready to go out into the garden. Now, some of you might think that begonias are a granny plant, and they are old-fashioned, okay, but I think they do a perfect job under trees. You can't kill them and they look fantastic. This is the cane stem begonia, and I really want to bulk up my planting under this tree, so I need some more cuttings, and they're quite hard to find at nurseries. So the way that you make more plants of begonia is by leaf cuttings. So what you do is just choose one of the older leaves and just snip it off straight under the leaf. Leaf cuttings are a little bit unusual. You can do it with begonias. You can also do it with African violets. And you need to segment the leaf because the whole leaf just doesn't work when you press it to the surface, so you need to cut it into 3. And make sure the main vein is in all 3 sections. So 1, 2, 3. Now all you need to do is nick the main vein at the back of the leaf and dust it into some root hormone powder. There we go. So it's nice and dusted. And then lay it on the surface of the soil. And you just need to pin it in place. So I've got some wire here to make a little tent peg to secure it on top of the soil. I'm going to make about a dozen cuttings today of my begonia, and in about 4 weeks' time they should have all developed new roots just where I've nicked it on the underside. And in about 3 months' time I can take those plants up and pot them on, and it'll be perfect timing for autumn planting.
Now, depending on where you live in Australia, you're going to have different kind of pebble available to you. And I've chosen this particular one because it's got flecks of neutral tones and also the charcoal, which is bringing up the charcoal in the steppers. One thing to be aware of when you're working up against the house, in particular when you're paving up against a building like this, is to be aware of your levels in regards to your damp course. Now, the damp course is usually indicated by some flashing that'll be poking out, or even some weep holes. And in this instance, we've got a brick that's a little bit proud of the wall, and that's where we're not going above. Now that we've got the pebbles down, it's time to bring in the good stuff, the pots and the plants. If you only get a couple of hours of sun a day in your side passage, look for plants that like a dappled light position, like these wonderful cordyline, which are really great foliage contrast against this green. This one's called rubra, but there's so many different types on the market, and they're pretty quick growing. And in fact, when they get a little bit older, each of these canes can become a new plant. So you simply just cut that off and do a stem cutting, which is a form of propagation. Now, the second plant we're using as a foliage contrast, which is working really well with this colour on the fence because of the purple underside, is called Tenanthe Grey Star. It sends up masses of leaves and forms a really nice clump. It's got this two-tone upper side, which is very attractive, and it's also a very upright plant. And that's the type of plant that you need for a side passage, something that isn't going to spill over and you're going to be fighting against when you walk up the side. Now, if you've got a window that looks out onto the side passage, why not put a feature on the wall like this beautiful Chinese screen, which just adds a little bit of texture and contrast, so you've got something lovely to look out onto. Well, how easy was that? Less than a day's work with my good old mate Paddy, under $1,000 for all these fabulous materials, and this boring, dull, lifeless side passage has really been transformed. Injections of foliage texture and, of course, that wonderful colour.
Now, of course, not all of us have a big suburban backyard to play around with. Many of us are actually living in smaller spaces, and that means smaller gardens and, of course, tiny balconies like this. But a little space doesn't mean that you can't garden. In fact, I'm going to show you how to transform one of these into an oasis using simple design and my selection of tough plants for those exposed conditions. This is called garden screening, and you can get it as a reed or a bamboo, and it comes in different heights. So I'm just going for 1 metre, obviously, so I don't block that light. It has to be the simplest and easiest way to dress up a balcony. It's really cheap. One of these rolls is about under 16 bucks for 3 metres, and all you have to do is roll it out and then tie it on with wire. Now, we all know that balconies don't exactly have the best access, and you're often lugging pots up flights of stairs. So, tip 1, choose urban light pots. They're about 60% lighter than standard glazed pots. They come in modern and traditional styles, and you can easily move them around your balcony, even full of plants and potting mix. Now, one of my pet hates is seeing balconies that are just covered in a hodgepodge collection of different containers. It tends to look really cluttered and messy, and the solution is to buy pot sets like this. So the pots come with the same colours, materials and styles, but different sizes, so you can group them together for extra impact. Now, all I have to do is get some great quality potting mix in these pots and then get stuck into some planting. Now, this is a northwest facing balcony, so it gets hot in the summer, and you'll also find that balconies, of course, get high winds, so the key is to choose tough, gorgeous looking plants. And what I've done is I've chosen a selection of textures, colours and forms that will match our beautiful containers, all contrast with them. So we've got Acacia Lime Magic at the centre with weeping foliage. I've used a plant called China Pink, which has burgundy leaves and a lovely slightly weeping form. At the front, we've got a lavender called Violet Lace, which is early flowering and has this vibrant colour. And then finally, we've used a euphorbia called Craigie Burn, which has really pretty lime bracts. Now, on our other side, in our cream containers, I've gone for a plant which really contrasts with the cream. So this is one called Agonis After Dark, really rich, darkly coloured foliage. At the front, we've got silver bush with our silver foliage and white flowers. And then at the back, a really tough rock rose that's called Silver Pink. Now, in a tight space, it's always a good idea to include features that have a dual purpose. So in this case, we've got a pot that doubles as garden art. And I've planted it out with a good old Aussie favourite, kangaroo paws. Okay, now just to dress up the space a bit and bring a bit of balance to this wall, we've got a nice piece of wall art. Then we're going to bring life and movement to this space with a water feature. And now, as a finishing touch, a beautiful outdoor setting just to make this a really functional, usable space. So what do you think? Well, it's definitely proof that you can still garden in a small space. Remember, this was an unwelcoming, unused space, and it's now a really inviting, functional place to be and a great extension of the house. And I did it all for under $1,300 and half a day's work. So that's something that's really achievable for you. I think you should go out there and do it this weekend. Well, thanks for joining us for another fantastic week in the garden. And I know it's been heaps of information to absorb, so don't forget to check out the Garden Angels website. Now, look at this veggie patch. It's like a jungle. Going off.
Leafy green.
In fact, I have a confession.
What?
I kind of ate all the strawberries that were there. But I did save you one, so you get half each. Nibble.
No, I've got snow peas. They're so much better.
Next week, I'm going back to primary school and the kids and I are going to build a worm farm.
Oh, and if you're sick of all that hand watering, well, don't worry. I'll show you how to put in a really simple drip irrigation system.
And I'm going to demystify the world of heirloom vegetables. So thanks for watching Garden Angels.